Uranium, one of the deadliest elements ever discovered, right next to me. Did you know that a block about this size releases as much power as 88 tons of coal? How about this? Uranium is 500 times more common than gold is, it's just more spread out. I wonder how it was discovered. Uranium is part of a group of elements called actinides, which means they have no stable isotopes and are highly electropositive. It's these properties that lead to the decay of the element to release more energy. Radium is a byproduct to the decay of uranium, leading to a less radioactive material that was used for medical purposes. Radium was used early on as a paint on watchtiles for its luminescence. Radium was discovered by Marie Curie by using 10 tons of uranium or pitchblende, which is about 22,000 pounds, and this produced only 1 milligram of radium. Now this is impressive as at that time there were limited supplies to actually separate these materials, and this discovery led to Curie getting a Nobel Prize. This is a very pick and choose case though, as 1 gram of radium could be worth up to $125,000. This meant that only the rich people could really have access to it, but it did aid in cancer treatments. This most likely led to the influx of uranium mines forming in the US, in turn making it more accessible. As radium becomes more readily available, there are more opportunities to experiment with it. These trials include having radium needles put into many places where cancerous tumors would be. In the 50s and the 60s, there wasn't as much of an opportunity to see how radium affected the body in a negative way. To its most basic degree, attacks bone cancer cells. This is because the chemical compound is similar to calcium, the element needed to form bone. This was discovered very recently, but it did prevent multiple cases of cancer from becoming lethal. Since it did help people in that case, scientists and doctors believed it to be a miracle cure that can cure every single cancer. Even though it did cure cancer in some cases, those cases could only be if the cancer has spread to the bone. If the cancer hasn't spread to the bone yet, then the radium will do more harm than good. One of these harmful things is that radium treatment can lead to more cancer forming. You heard that right. The cancer treatment led to more cancer. In other cases, it can lead to anemia, cataracts, broken teeth, and reduced bone growth. In even smaller cases, radium treatment can lead to radiation poisoning, but that's more of an issue for stronger radioactive materials. These items include things like toothpaste, hair creams, and even food items because of its supposed beneficial health properties. Radium was also put into paints to get a glow to the paint, and this was used on things like clock dials. The radium girls were the main group exposed to this radium use, as they were the people who painted these watch dials. Now this wouldn't be as large of an issue if they were just around the radium, but they were licking the tip of the paintbrushes before every use. Constant physical exposure led to them having long-term medical conditions such as anemia, leukopenia, lymphocytosis, and eosinophilia. Now, these awful illnesses led to the end of recreational use of radium, but it wasn't until 1925 that the illnesses were connected to the exposure to radium through law, and in 1928 radium was banned in these factories. Between 1940 and 1978, these factories were very keen on keeping the business going, so they told the women it was safe to continue work as long as they didn't wet the brushes with their saliva. Illnesses did persist in these cases, but it did become an OSHA violation to be exposed to radium in the factories in around 1970. Now that we've talked about radium for a hot minute, I feel like we can move on to talking about uranium. Now, a lot of stuff can come from uranium, like how radium has, and due to its chemical breakdown, there's an opportunity to separate the isotopes. I don't feel like saying a bunch of scientific words that I'll mispronounce miserably, so let's just go over the product of the isotopes being separated. Enriched uranium is this product of the isotopes being separated. In a nutshell, enriched uranium is just natural uranium with a higher concentration of the U-235 isotope. With this higher concentration, this element allows uranium to be fissionable in light water reactors. The chemical compound of enriched uranium is similar to natural uranium, except for the fact it has a higher percentage of the U-235 isotope. To be able to do this, all the other isotopes need to be reduced. In these 3 processes, the U-235 isotope goes from around 0.4% to around 94%. This process involves using uranium hexafluoride, the byproduct of yellow cake, which is the powder form of uranium, and throwing it through a diffuser with small holes just large enough to pass through the lighter isotopes, while the heavier ones stay inside the diffuser. The second process is putting it through a gas centrifuge. This process involves also using uranium hexafluoride, but putting it through a slightly different unit. This unit uses gravity to push the heavier isotopes to the wall of the centrifuge, but the lighter isotopes collect towards the center of the centrifuge. The last process is called laser separation. This process is not currently in the works, but there is a power plant being built so the process can be used. It involves using a laser, what a surprise, to excite the molecules within the uranium. This is called photoexcitation, and it has the ability to change the properties of an isotope, allowing it to separate. Processes are needed to be used in nuclear power, as natural uranium doesn't have as much power as enriched uranium. Enriched uranium pretty much just gives off more energy than normal uranium. Nuclear power plants are by far the most efficient source of energy available. According to data collected from the Office of Nuclear Energy, nuclear power plants give off around 92.5% of the energy that's possible, whereas coal and hydropower plants don't even cross 42%. These power plants supply about a fifth of the power of the grid in the US, and is one of those things where it doesn't harm the environment as much. So let me ask you something. Would you rather have 4 coal processing plants that are killing the environment, or 1 nuclear power plant that doesn't do any harm to the environment? But enough about how it's better, let's talk about what actually happens inside of the power plant. To have this power generated and distributed to the grid, these power plants need to go through a process called nuclear fission. This fission is then used to rapidly heat water, which creates steam. This steam then goes through a reactor steam system to spin large turbine blades that drive magnetic generators to produce electricity. With all this occurring within the facility, there are many chances where something can go wrong. Incidents are called meltdowns, and they happen when the reactor isn't properly cooled. When these reactors aren't cooled, this can cause fuel rods to spontaneously combust, releasing radiation into the atmosphere. One of these cases is the Chernobyl explosion. I'm going to try to be brief with this because I have another incident I want to talk about. The Chernobyl accident occurred in April 1986 and was primarily due to the fact that reactor 4 had a design flaw that led to a full meltdown. This meltdown happened during a safety system test, and multiple explosions went off within the reactor. This event was also caused by poor training of the workers and led to a large radiation-filled cloud to go across Europe and cause the town of Chernobyl to become a dead zone. There were multiple reported cases of thyroid cancer and radiation sickness following this event. Now, another one of these cases are a little more direct, and I'm going to talk about the individual more than the incident itself. There was this individual named Hisashi Ouchi, and he may have been one of the worst cases of human experimentation in relation to nuclear incidents. Ouchi was exposed to about 17 sieverts of radiation, which is the highest exposure to date and way past the lethal amount during a meltdown at the Takemura power plant. This incident was also caused by poor training of handlers, but this wasn't from a safety test. This incident was caused by direct exposure to the radioactive material during a manual cooling process. This happened, hospitals had no clue how to treat radiation sickness, so Ouchi was exposed to numerous experimental treatments. These treatments were deemed unsuccessful as there was no way in repairing the fact that Ouchi lost the chromosomes responsible for skin regeneration. These experiments lasted around 83 days before they let him pass away. Both of these incidents could have been prevented if the workers had had proper training. These incidents are very rare and occur far less than coal mining incidents or any other power source out there. I digress though. Overall, uranium has evolved its uses over time. It went from having radium being injected into people's bodies to cure cancer, and then eventually being used in household items due to its medical benefits. But these benefits were short-lived as it was discovered that it did more harm than good. The radium girls also made it so radium was outlawed for use in factories. On the other hand, uranium was enriched so it could be used in power plants among other things. This is still used today, but not without its controversies within multiple incidents that led to many deaths. But it was proven that nuclear power is the safest in performance with proper training and the most efficient power source. This information given has been able to show why uranium is such a powerful element and why it really shouldn't be used in medical purposes. Maybe at some point nuclear power will be the dominant source of power and we can live a more sustainable life in the future. But that's expensive, so we get what we get.